Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, when I was covering P. Diddy and we talked about Fort Dix, maybe a calculation of how much time he'll have to spend in either in prison. We also talked about the RDAP program. We covered a lot. But one thing I forgot to cover, and it should be worth mentioning, is his supervised release process. Now, I've talked to some people, put something together here. So I just wanted to kind of go over what the release process will be for him once he gets out. So again, this is about P. Diddy and life for him once he gets released. Regardless of how much time he does, this is what life is going to be about once he gets released. So let's talk about the latest chapter in Sean Diddy Combs' case, specifically what life is going to be, what life is going to look like for him once he's released from prison. Now, TMZ just revealed the special conditions that will apply during his supervised release. And these rules tell us a lot about how the court views his risk, his past, and what they want from him going forward. So I want to talk about the difference of understanding supervised release versus parole. So before we dive into Diddy's specific condition, it's crucial to understand what supervised release actually is. Unlike parole, which replaces part of a prison sentence, supervised release is a mandatory period of monitoring that happens after someone completes their full prison term. It's part of the federal sentencing system. It's codified under 18 U.S.C. 3583, and judges are required to impose it for certain offenses. Think of it this way. If Diddy receives a 10-year sentence with 3 years of supervised release, he serves all 10 years behind bars and then faces 3 additional years under strict monitoring in the community. This isn't mercy or early freedom. It's an extension of the sentence designed to facilitate reintegration while protecting public safety. Now, this idea emerged from the Sentences Reform Act of 1984, which abolished federal parole and replaced it with the system. The reasoning: Congress wanted determinate sentencing, meaning what a judge announces in court is what actually happens, without parole boards making subjective release decisions years later. Now, the special conditions, what they mean and why they matter. So mandatory treatment programs. First, a judge is requiring Diddy to participate in outpatient treatment programs for both substance abuse and mental health. This means that even after he walks out of a correctional facility, he won't just be free to go back to business as usual. He will be monitored through programs designed to address addiction issues and underlying psychological concerns. On top of that, he'll be required to take any prescribed medication unless the health provider specifically instructs otherwise. Why this matters: courts can only impose treatment conditions when they're reasonably related to the offense, reasonably related to the offense, the defendant's history, or protecting the public. And that's also outlined in 18 U.S.C.3583D, subsection D. The fact that the judge included both substance abuse and mental health treatment suggests the court has evidence or testimony indicating these issues played a role in his criminal conduct. This isn't speculative. It's based on pre-sentence investigations, so the PSI reports, psychiatric evaluations, or documented history presented during sentencing. Treatment conditions also serve a utilitarian, God, these words, but they serve a utilitarian purpose. Research from the Bureau of Justice Statistics show that offenders who complete substance abuse programs have recidivism rates 25 to 30% lower than those who don't. The court is essentially mandating rehabilitation as a form of public safety. Then he has the domestic violence program. And so second, Diddy will be forced to enroll in a domestic violence program. This condition hits especially hard given his history. TMZ also references the 2016 hotel hallway incident with Cassie, which resurfaced in lawsuits and media coverage in recent years. By ordering this program, the courts is addressing what many view as a longstanding pattern of violence towards women in his past. And the legal framework is domestic violence treatment programs aren't just anger management classes. They're structured interventions, often lasting between 26 to 52 weeks, that uses models like the Duluth curriculum, which focuses on power, control, and accountability. And participants examine belief systems that enable abuse, learn to recognize warning signs in their own behavior, and work specifically on victim empathy. For someone like Diddy, whose identity is built around power influence, and control in the entertainment industry, this programming challenges the very foundations of how he operated for decades. Courts impose this condition under the authority of 18 U.S.C. 3563, subsection B, 10, which allows any other conditioning it considers to be appropriate when reasonably related to sentencing goals. It's also worth noting completion isn't automatic. He'll need to show progress, attend regularly, and pass evaluations from program facilitators. If he fails to engage meaningfully, that's a violation, and violations can mean revoking, and return to prison. So firearms prohibition. Third, the court has stripped him of the ability to own or access any firearms or destructive devices. This is standard in many violent cases, but given Diddy's influence, resources, and lifestyle, it's especially significant. Why this goes beyond standard restriction: federal law already prohibits convicted felons from possessing firearms under 18 U.S.C. 922 subsection G, but supervised release conditions make this explicit and enforceable through immediate sanctions. If Diddy is found near a firearm, even one registered to security personnel or stored at a property he owns, he can be held accountable. This condition also extends to destructive devices, a legal term that includes explosives, certain types of ammunition, and weapons with specific characteristics under the National Firearms Act. For someone with Diddy's wealth, who could theoretically hire armed security or maintain properties with weapons, this condition creates a clear line: no firearms, period. Closes the door on any potential for intimidation, retaliation, or even just the appearance of being armed. And then you got the mandatory search provisions. Fourth, he's required to submit to searches. That means at any time during his supervised release, probation officers can search his residence, his car, or even his person if they have reasonable suspicion. Now, the Fourth Amendment tension. Normally, the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches, but courts have consistently held that people on supervised release have diminished privacy expectations established in United States v. Knights, 2001, where the Supreme Court ruled that probation search conditions are constitutional when they serve legitimate governmental interests and aren't arbitrary. For Diddy, this means probation officers can show up unannounced at his home. They can search vehicles, offices, storage units, even hotel rooms if he's traveling. They can demand access to phones, computers, and financial records, and they need only reasonable suspicion, not probable cause like regular law enforcement. Now, this condition is all about control and compliance, making sure he knows he's under watch and can't hide contraband or engage in behaviors outside the court's rules. It also serves as a deterrent. The mere possibility of random searches discourages violations. And then you got the no contact order. Fifth, and maybe most important for the victims, is tied to this case, is Diddy is forbidden from any contact with them. No phone calls, no social media messages, no indirect communication through friends or associates. How these orders actually work: no contact orders aren't just suggestions. They're enforceable conditions with serious consequences. The order typically include direct contact prohibition and in-person, phone, mail, etc. Indirect contact prohibition through third parties, social media, public statements. Geographic restrictions: staying away from victims' homes, workplaces, known locations. And digital restrictions: blocking on all platforms, no monitoring of their accounts. Courts take this very seriously because no contact orders are designed to protect victims from harassment, retaliation, or manipulation. If Diddy violates this, even something as seemingly minor as viewing a victim's Instagram story, the probation officer can file a violation petition. The judge then holds a hearing, and if the violation is proven by preponderance of evidence, not beyond reasonable doubt, Diddy could be sent back to prison for the remainder of his supervised release term. And guys, by the way, a preponderance of evidence is less than beyond a reasonable doubt. So you don't need that much to prove it. If he's there on checking out that Instagram, why? What are you looking at? The challenge for high-profile defendants: for someone like Diddy, whose life has been lived publicly and whose business empire connects him to thousands of people in entertainment, these restrictions are particularly complex. What if a victim attends the same industry event? What if they've interviewed about him in the What if they're interviewed about him in the media? What if mutual business associates need to coordinate? The burden is on him to avoid contact, not on the victim to hide. That's going to be interesting. Standard conditions: the foundation of oversight. Now, all this comes on top of the standard condition of supervised release. Things like staying crime-free, reporting regularly to probation officers, and maintaining lawful employment. These are boilerplate rules, but they create the daily structure of supervised release. So you got the regular reporting, typically monthly meetings with the probation officer where he'll answer questions about his activities, submit a drug testing, and account for his whereabouts. Then you got employee requirements. He must maintain lawful employment or be actively seeking it. For someone of Diddy's wealth, this might seem irrelevant, but courts interpret employment broadly. It can include managing business interests, creative work, or even structured volunteer activity. The key is demonstrating productive, law-abiding contribution to society. And then you got the residence restriction. He must maintain an approved residence and get permission before traveling or moving. Even a trip to another city requires advance notification and approval. Financial obligation. He must pay any restitution, fines, or special assessments offered by the court. This includes financial disclosure requirements. Probation officers monitor income and assess and assets to ensure compliance, and truthfulness requirements. He must answer questions truthfully. Lying to a probation officer, even about something seemingly minor, is itself a violation. It's the special condition that tell us the court's priorities, the court's prioritized treatment, accountability, and victim protection. But the standard conditions create the infrastructure that makes enforcement possible. And we talked about the prison placement question. I want to revisit it one more time. One more detail worth noting, the judge also weighed in on where Diddy will serve his time. The recommendation is that he be placed as close to New York City as possible. Diddy's legal team has specifically asked for FCI Fort Dix, a low-security facility in New Jersey. We discussed this in a few shows back. And understand the judicial recommendation under 18 U.S.C. 3621 subsection B, the Bureau of Prisons has sole authority over designation where an inmate serves time. And I said that in the last episode. You know, the Bureau of Prisons can decide where he goes. That's what their job is for. That's what they do. They're in the best position to determine what's the safest route for him and what's the most beneficial. However, judges can make recommendations, and courts have held that BOP must consider them, even if they're not binding. Why does placement matter? Several reasons. Family contact, proximity to New York City means easier visits from family, which research shows reduce recidivism and aids reintegration. We discussed this, and this is great. We know it's needed, but he's also could be using these things to manipulate placement. Legal access. Being near his attorney facilitates ongoing legal work, appeals, and post-conviction matters. Business continuity. While he can't actively manage businesses from prison, being near New York City makes authorized communication with trustees or business managers more feasible. And facility conditions. FCI Fort Dix is minimum security with relatively better conditions, dormitory-style housing rather than cells, and more programming options and less restrictive movement. Like the program option will be the RDAP program. While judges can only make recommendations, final placement is up to the Bureau of Prisons. Those recommendations do carry weight. BOP considers factors like security classification, program needs, proximity to release residents, and bed availability. A judge recommendation becomes part of the calculus. What does this mean for the big picture? All right, this is the last part here. So when you add this all together, what does it mean? Even when Diddy leaves prison, he'll not be a free man in the traditional sense. His daily life will be restricted by treatment, programs, monitoring, no contact orders, and the constant possibility of searches. These conditions are a message from the justice system that his freedom is conditional, fragile, and tethered to his compliance. The recidivism question, federal data shows that supervised release violations lead to reincarceration in about 15 to 20% of cases. The most common violations, failing drug tests, unauthorized contact with victims, and failing to participate meaningfully in treatment. For a high-profile defendant with resources, the risks are somewhat different. The temptation might be using wealth and influence to work around restrictions or believing that fame provides insulation from consequences. The wealth factor, Diddy's substantial resources create unique challenges and opportunities. On one hand, he can afford the best treatment providers, compliance, monitoring, and legal counsel to navigate supervised release successfully. On the other hand, wealth can create blind spots, a sense that rules are negotiable or that money solves problems that actually require accountability and changed behavior. The public accountability dimension, high-profile supervised release cases serve as public education about the justice system. They demonstrate that sentences don't end at the prison gate, that rehabilitation is mandated, not optional, and that ongoing monitoring protects communities. For victims watching this case, the condition sends a message that their safety is taken seriously, that Diddy can't simply buy his way back to his old life. The entertainment industry reckoning. This case sits within a larger cultural moment of accountability for powerful men in entertainment who allegedly used their position to harm others. The supervised release conditions acknowledge that what lawsuit media report. The supervised release conditions acknowledge what lawsuits, media reports, and victim statements have documented a pattern of behavior that requires intervention, monitoring, and structural restrictions to prevent recurrence. And for the public, this is another reminder that high-profile figures aren't exempt from strict oversight. If anything, their cases become a blueprint for how the system responds to wealth, power, and abuse of influence. When the sentence is when the sentence is announced and the headlines fade, the real work of supervised release begins. Daily compliance, ongoing treatment, regular accountability, and the slow, difficult process of behavior change under the watchful eye of the federal system. The question isn't whether Diddy will face these conditions. The judge has ordered them. The question is whether he'll take them seriously, engage authentically, and with treatment, respect the boundaries set to protect victims, and ultimately demonstrate that accountability can lead to genuine change. The conditions create the structure. What happens within the structure is up to him. So that's pretty much the latest update for P. Diddy. There's a lot there. I'd love to get your thoughts because there's a lot of things that are a bit more complicated for him to have to manage. But hey, he's got to manage it. That's the key. I would love your thoughts on that, but I've done some videos on Diddy as well, especially since he's been sentenced. If you guys are more familiar with the system, feed in, comment. Let's grow from this. I'm learning as well. And just love your thoughts. Stay safe.